Hi, I'm Wendy and I'm Sunflower Publishing. For those of you that don't know me, hello, benvenuti, welcome. I'm a book blogger, I'm a book reviewer for any books set in Italy, and I host writing retreats in Italy. Why do I do that? Because I have two passions, well, apart from my husband, two passions in life, Italy and books. And doing this as a hobby was an absolutely amazing way to combine my passions. So Italy and books. Now, I am so excited to welcome my guest, Tricia Cusden from Look Fabulous Forever. Now, I don't think she needs any introduction because I know that you know her inspirational journey. But for those of you who need a quick reminder, businesswoman, entrepreneur, beauty vlogger, writer, and now author. Yeah. Welcome, Tricia.
Thank
Benvenuti.
thank you, Wendy.
So, what I'd like to start doing first, if that's all right with you, can we start with the book? Shall we start present day, Tricia?
Mhm.
And we'll talk about the book and the writing journey. And then, if we may, we can just go a little bit into your past to discover where this all started.
Okay.
Over to you, Tricia. Title of the book and a précis, please. Here's one I made earlier.
Yeah. So, title of the book is "Like a Bird Without a Song." If you don't know where that comes from, I had a bit of an inspiration. I was really struggling to find it. I wanted a compelling title. I, the working title I had was Anam Cara, which is Irish for soulmates. But I thought nobody knows what that means, and it probably doesn't resonate terribly well. And then I came across there's a feature in the book around the song "Nothing Compares to You," which is that beautiful Sinead O'Connor song. And the second verse of it, I was listening to it on the other one day, and the second verse of it was written by Prince, by the way, that song. And in the second verse it says, "I feel without you, I feel like a bird without a song." And I just thought, oh gosh, what a lovely expression, like a bird without a song. What would be sadder than having a bird who couldn't sing? And I just wrote it down, and then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, this is my title. And then I put in the sort of subtitles, which are soulmate, separation, and second chances, which is kind of tells the story, really. It's about two soulmates, and they separate for some reason, and then they have another go at their relationship 20 years later. So that is the book, and that's the one that's going to be published next week.
We have a couple of the two main characters. We have, you sent me the prologue. We have Finn and we have Evie. So they are the two main characters. Um, and I read the prologue that you sent me, and I have to say, it flows very, very beautifully. I think has anyone else read the book, by the way? Has anyone else ordered it to read it yet? Quite a few, probably. Just put your hands in the air if you have. It's I mean, some of the readers, the reviews that came in very, very early are amazing. A gorgeous love story that keeps you turning the pages. That's very, very beautiful. Deftly told with tender care and real insight. I got drawn back into the story very, very quickly. It's very the reviews are amazing. You must be absolutely thrilled with the reviews that you've had so far.
I am thrilled. I tell you what, when I was writing this book, all I wanted from it, to be honest with you, was that readers would read it and love it. You know, if you're writing a story which you think you are ultimately going to put out into the world, all you want is for people to read it. Otherwise, why are you doing it? You know, it's not, otherwise, don't tell anybody, just put it in a drawer and forget about it. And I suppose one of the biggest enjoyment that I've had out of it, the greatest enjoyment, is actually that process of people reading it and then loving it, but also taking these characters to heart and saying things to me like, oh, I was really worried when so and so did so and so, and you know, it concerned me a lot, as though they are real people.
Yeah.
And to me, the proof of any book that I want to read is one where I become so engaged and invested in the characters. I care about them. I want them to be okay. I worry about them. And I think, oh no, don't let that happen. And so to answer your question about reviews, when you get a review that says all of those things that I've just mentioned, it's absolutely music to your ears, because it's like,
Imagine.
this is what I wanted. This is what was important to me. And the more people that do that, and now I have a considerable number of people who've been following my journey all the way through, the people I call my super readers, who are ones who are nearly at the end of the book with me. I shall read the last part of the book to them next week, just before I publish. And quite a few of them are on this call, and they've been part of my journey. And it's just been wonderful to have their company, because they have kept me going and kept me energized and enthused about what I'm doing. So it's been
Well,
that's been
I was going to say, as an author, generally, I don't think people realize what a lonely profession it can be. Because, you know, you do need the peace, you need the quiet, you need concentration. And many authors just shut themselves away for months, literally, just to write. So that when the book actually goes out there and is released, and you say you start to get the reviews, it's suddenly you've got that sense of community who are reading the book and loving it. You've got that validation that the hours that you've poured into it, you've created something magical. I mean, a lot of people say it's like giving birth, don't they, when you actually publish a book, because it comes out of you. I mean, one thing that I loved in the synopsis about Evie and Finn, and you say, but this, I think this is so lovely. Both are forced to understand what happened 20 years previously was not the end of their story, but the beginning of its consequences. Now, as mature people, which we are, we do have the benefit of reflection. I hope everyone agrees with me. We do reflect more, don't we? And maybe that just possibly comes out in writing, that think of your own story, think of your own youth, think of the people who that you went out with. It's not about the story, it's the consequences of who you met and whose lives that you touched. So I think that's absolutely beautiful. I really do.
Thank you. I think when you have had a long life, as I have had a reasonably long life, I'm now 78. I think what happens is that when you review your life and you look back at those critical moments, those critical relationships that you had, you can see them. You have a perspective which allows you to view that and think, what did that mean in my life? And at the time,
Yeah.
it might mean something entirely different. But when you get some kind of distance from it, you realize it was about something else. And I think with the story that I was trying to tell, you've got two characters who at the beginning in the prologue, you know, this is present day, you know that they are not terribly happy, either of them. They start in the beginning of the book, they're young, they're quite starry-eyed, they're very idealistic, and they think to themselves, you know, well, one of them, I think there's one, I want to entertain everyone and I want to cure everyone. She wants to be an amazing doctor. He wants to be an amazing actor. And when you are young, you can have terrific idealism and you want to do those things. And then life gets in the way because they are both disillusioned when we meet them at the beginning. And I suppose in the second part of the book, which I really enjoyed writing a lot, the second part, it kind of wrote itself in lots of ways because it kept kept being suggested to me. When I wrote that second part, it was to say, okay, you can start off like that, then life gets in the way, and then something happens, and then how do you deal with that? Because it's the how do you deal with it that then, well, it creates the story, obviously, but it also means you end up feeling perhaps at the end of your life very dissatisfied and frustrated that you didn't do certain things, or at the end of your life you think, well, I know why that happened and I'm glad it happened and that was an incredibly important part of my life. I have no regrets about that whatsoever because it was brilliant. And I think that's what I'm trying to say in this story. Something starts, you're idealistic, something happens, and, these two characters, we know from the prologue, something's gone terribly wrong because they see each other and, he doesn't want to speak to her. It's like, what on earth has happened there? And then how does that get resolved? And does it get resolved in a way that for the reader, because it was always, I had this story in my head and then I had to write it down, and I wanted it for the reader to become incredibly satisfying. That they'd have their expectations met, because when I'm reading a book, that's what I want. I don't want to put a book down at the end and think, well, why the hell did you kill her?
Well, yes. I think that there has to be, generally, I think in creative writing, there has to be a resolution, not necessarily the perfect ending, but there does have to be some kind of resolution for the reader, I guess, really. And just moving on slightly to the art of creative writing. Now, you've written for a long time. I know you have. So obviously the interest was always there. But, a vlog, a blog, a journal, a diary, writing a story, writing a piece of romantic fiction with the beginning and the middle and the end, that's a whole different ball game. How did you feel about your creative writing skills to do this task?
Well, the thing is, you don't know what you don't know, do you?
No, no, you don't. No.
You do something. And I have read thousands of books in my life. I mean, I must have done. I have read every day of my life, since I was about 6 or 7, without fail. And I think when you've read hundreds and, possibly, for definitely thousands of books, I think what you learn from that process is a huge amount. I think from reading, if you're a very avid reader, from reading what grabs you, how it grabs you, what you like about plot development, characterization, dialogue. I'm a very visual person.
When he gets the battery, is he going to fit it?
Well, I hope so.
I've got somebody chatting. It's fine. So I'm a very visual person. Obviously, I run a makeup company, so therefore, I've always been very interested in the way things look, and I love everything to do with what.
Whatever it is.
Did you just tap on it?
I'll tap.
Susie,
Going around in circles.
sweetheart, can you just turn your mic off? We can hear your husband in the background. Susie?
It's not Susie.
Who is it?
It's somebody who's got their microphone on. I think they've gone.
Okay.
It's Jane. Jane
What's
Evans is
Okay.
is not muted.
Okay, she is now.
Is now.
Yeah, she is now. So I've always been an avid reader, and I think that helps a lot. So, and I've always loved writing. I've always known that I could write well, let's put it that way, in whatever writing I've done. I know it's a very, very different form. And I think, for those people who read English literature at university and who study creative writing and courses and all that sort of stuff, they might feel quite cross with me in lots of ways to even think that I could do this. And when I started it, because I've had this idea running around in my head for such a long time, I can't tell you. These characters were there and they were kind of forming, and I'd have ideas about scenes and all that sort of stuff. I could see it. I could see so much of it so vividly. And I just one day started writing it all down with no great intentions that anybody else would see it. In fact, it was an absolute secret that I kept for a long time. And then so in terms of the process, but I did have some development with this, Wendy, and I think this is really, really important to say. What I did was I wrote it. In fact, what I wrote was the first half of the story, the love story, the thing that goes back 20 years. It started in 2005. And I got to 82,000 words quite quickly. And then I thought it was all right, but I didn't know. So the only person I shared it with at that stage was my Irish friend, Siobhan. So there's a lot of Irish stuff in it. And I wanted her to correct the language, the rhythm of the everything really to do with Ireland. She'd give me pointers about places and things like that. Anyway, I got hold of Faber Academy. I saw Faber Academy advertised somewhere, and I emailed them and said, what do you offer in terms of services and stuff? And they said, we will read your manuscript and give you feedback about it. A professional will give you feedback. And I just thought that's brilliant. It was 500 quid. And I thought that was a bargain.
It's worth it to get that feedback. It's the sense of validation. But you're absolutely spot on, Tricia, I think, with anyone can write a book if they are an avid reader. I think that's really, we see so many people come on the writing retreat. Some have creative writing degrees, and other people have that sort of imposter syndrome. I don't have a degree in creative writing. I just read a lot. And we say, that's all you need. That's all you need. It really is. Because you have the imagination. I mean, you did have a head start, to be fair, because you'd done so much writing with your blogs. And where's my, just to prove, I'm faithful to your brand. I have my own copy of your first book. So I guess, you were a little ahead of the game. I know what you mean about being a new writer, but I think the writing process, I think you had a little bit of a head start there with your writing. Would you agree?
I did yes, I did, definitely, no question about it. But I also think I'm gonna bang the drum for being older again, which I'm a great believer in. As you get older, that just having a go, it's like, what have I got to lose? I literally have nothing to lose, nothing, absolutely. Zero. No. This is just my time, this is my energy, and it's nothing else. And my first investment in terms of money was this feedback, which was 500 quid. And what happened with that was, I've written a blog this week about it. It's called How a Timely Word Can Make All the Difference. And it was a timely word. So I sent off this 82,000 word thing back. And I got such brilliant, constructive feedback from that process. It was unbelievably good. The woman who did it, I don't know who she was. It was an anonymous process. She basically wrote 11 pages, and she started off by saying two really important things right at the beginning. First of all, she said, well done for doing something that only a very small percentage of people ever get around to doing. True. And secondly, this is a great story with and she said, on a line-by-line basis, you have a very clear writing style. It's a great story, but it needs a lot of work. Okay. Now, that didn't daunt me at all, because she said two things: well done and basis of a good story. And then she said, she gave me 11 pages, picking out bits that worked, bits that didn't work, fillers, stuff that I needed to change. Really, really helpful stuff. I can't tell you, brilliant stuff. Like a creative writing course condensed into 11 pages.
It's like getting your homework back, isn't it?
Yeah, homework with a lot of encouragement. Yes. And out of that, I cut it in half. I cut 40,000 words off.
Wow.
I then rewrote. So I had thought that I'd do a second book, which would be the resolution, the consequences bit would be a second book. And instead of doing that, I wrote the second half as the end of the story. And then that was my that's about the third or fourth draft that I did. And that was when I then sent it to a couple of people to read, and I got brilliant feedback from it. Readers, not professionals, readers, people that would read it, my ideal reader. And one of them was a very, very close friend. And I thought, you know what? She will not bullshit me. She will say it like it is. She'll be kind because she's kind, but she won't say, I love it. She'll say something like, not my kind of book.
No.
Didn't. She actually wrote back and said, I feel bereft that this book is finished. I loved it so much. And it's just like, oh, that's amazing. And she was, congratulations. What an amazing achievement. Well done. I really did love it. And from that moment, I gathered all sorts of confidence. I had told no one about this. I didn't tell my daughters. I couldn't tell anybody. It wasn't a guilty secret, but it was a tender secret. It was a secret that I felt so vulnerable about revealing, because I thought, when you write something from your imagination, you're putting yourself into it. I'm not in the book, but my imagination's in the book. And it's like, you're so vulnerable. I can't tell you how vulnerable you are. But when you get the sort of feedback that I've had, you just think, okay, I'm not Dostoevsky, I'm not Jane Austen. I'm never going to be those people. But what I can do, apparently, is tell a good story that people want to read. End of. And that's what happened. And by the end of that process, I just thought, what have I got to lose?
You haven't really. You haven't. I mean, I think you are such an inspirational person. I think whatever you did, you would be successful at it. I think you're that kind of a person. So I think whatever you did, you're going to make a success of it. And I think that inspiration it just creates the ripple waves. I mean, you can see that with the followers that you've got, your subscribers, your fans. You're just a great person. For anything is possible. It doesn't really matter how old you are. Anything is possible. And you're proving this now, because yet again, you're reinventing yourself as an author. I mean, what is next, Tricia? What is next? Another book.
Well, I'm writing the second book now.
Yes.
I'm halfway through. Yeah, I mean, look, I think I just feel like in life, if you're under the right circumstances, and you are supported well enough to have a go at something, you never know what's possible.
No,
You just
you don't. No, you
possible.
don't.
And with this, I think I didn't even have a long-held, secret desire to become an author. I really didn't, but I knew that I loved writing, and I just thought I'll have a go, and this has been the result. And I will say to you, Wendy, without question, the last 8-9 months of my life where I've been involved with this and down in the weeds of it have been the most enjoyable of my life. And that sounds so stupid, that, like hyperbolic to say. That's like, oh, she can't mean that. But there is something so joyous about the process of writing, which I don't find particularly difficult. And also that I record myself all the time on my phone, on WhatsApp. So I read it out, record it as a voice note, and then I listen to it in the bath when I've written something. And Martin Amis wrote this wonderful thing about writing in his last book before he died. And he talked about having a mind's ear, that we all think about a mind's eye. I see it in my mind's eye, but he says, I think we all have a mind's ear. And when you can hear something and it makes sense and it actually is pleasurable to listen to, then it works. And so that's how I'm doing it with the second book. I'm constantly recording it and listening to it. And it helps me enormously to hear the dialogue and to hear whether it works. And that process in itself has been joyous, absolutely joyous. And then all the reactions that I've had to it. And it's like literally what's not to like. I mean, there is nothing about this that is not to like, because there's nothing riding on it. I didn't do it for money. I didn't. You sent me a little questionnaire beforehand.
Yes, I did, and I'll put that out to everybody else. One of the questions that I always ask my people the authors I interview, I always say to them, "What does fame look like for you? Is it, is it the money? Is it the literary success? What does it mean to you?" So you can answer that. You obviously gave that some thought.
I laughed. I laughed when I saw that question. Like, I don't think there are very, very, very few authors in the world who make money out of
Well,
writing.
very few say the money, to be honest with you. Very few say the money. Yeah.
And I've been doing some digging and research into average numbers of books sold. Publishing traditionally, hybrid publishing and self-publishing, which is what I've done. Self-publishing, the average is 300 books. I mean, it's infinitesimal.
I know.
And of course you don't make, in fact, you make a loss, a big loss on if you only sell 300 books. There's no way I did this to make money. I did it for
you,
pleasure for me.
Absolutely.
And then the possibility that if it went out there into the world and it actually gathered I gave some people pleasure and enjoyment. That's what I did it for. Certainly not for fame. I mean, I wrote this book. Part of this book is about a very famous person, an Irish actor who's 40. And he, in the second part of the book, suffers quite seriously from, those parts of fame that are really unpleasant, prurience, into people sticking their nose into your business, social media, nasty comments, all of that horrible stuff that people have to go through these days on social media. And I wrote that because I wanted to say in that part of the story that his disillusionment comes from the fact that, if you're doing well, people love you. And if you do badly, then you get brickbats and you get things thrown at you. And it's horrible. So I certainly didn't do it for that. And I don't think this book is going to make me famous. It certainly isn't going to make me lots of money. But the point is that, why did I do it? I did it because I wanted to, because I enjoyed doing it. And also because at the end of it, I was getting enough positive feedback from people to think, okay, that's what I need.
I think what fascinates me is the writing journey, because no successful author starts at the top. They just don't. There's always a journey that they start from. And it's lovely to speak to authors like Tricia. What is the writing journey? Where did it start? And it might be quite nice at this moment just to go back to, I know that when you were a teacher, one of the things that you really focused on with your kids was getting them to read. And I know that when you lived in Suffolk, when you were young, you wrote journals, you wrote books. It's always been part of your life, the reading and the writing. And so that journey started a long time ago. Really. And it's now through all the experience that you've had, and you've had a wealth of experience, that we've got to the point that we have. Just going back to the books that you read as a child, what would you say is your favourite childhood book?
Well, obviously there were lots of Enid Blytons in my day.
Everyone says this, Jeannie Blyton. Yes.
Blyton was a brilliant writer for children.
I know.
Books, so I do remember those. But my seminal book, the one that sticks, was a coming of age book, really, and I often mention it because actually I still read it. I still think it's the most incredibly written book, and that's 1984 by George Orwell. And I read Animal Farm, I think, for O-level. and then read by choice 1984. I was quite cross last week because I was listening to a new podcast, which, if any of you are interested in books, it is potentially going to be a really interesting podcast. It's Dominic Sandbrook of The Rest is History. I love The Rest is History. And he and Tabitha Syrett, I think she's I'm not sure what she is, an editor or something. She's young, like 30 odd. I think of that as young. And they discuss books every week. They've just started, so it's they're on the third book. So the first book they discussed was Wuthering Heights, very relevant to the film. Second book, Kazuo Ishiguro's Never Let Me Go, which is a film that I run a book club. We've had in our book club, we watched the film with Keira Knightley and Andrew Garfield. And the third book they've discussed is 1984. And I was quite cross because Tabitha Syrett said, I didn't enjoy this book. I thought it was a man's book. It's not a girl's, it's a boy's book. And it's like, no, it's not. I read it when I was 16, and I can remember reading it and being absolutely rocked to my core, because it was about when you're governed in a way that makes you terrified and frightened, it's horrible. And it's about so much, that book. There is a love story in it. It's not particularly well told in terms of the love element, but you know, they're not really allowed to have love in it because that's the point. But you know, the Ministry of Love is actually about hate. The Ministry
it's very relevant today. I mean, it's like
very relevant. I could endlessly give you chapter and verse about what is happening today. Relates to that. And he wrote it in 1948. He wrote it post-war, and it does reflect. I mean, you know, I was a child in the 1950s, and it very definitely reflects that post-war period when there was rationing and there was, you know, life wasn't particularly comfortable a lot of the time. And I just think that I think that was the first time I had ever read a book that I sat all the way through thinking, this is incredible. Every word of this matters and is relevant. I've since read it maybe 8-9 times. I read it, you know, I often reread it just because I want to. I think it is really excellent writing. I've read all of George Orwell's books, every single one. And I just feel like when you read a book that resonates so profoundly, I've got in my second book that I'm now writing, I've got a character in there who's deeply troubled, and he buys a book and he cries when he's reading it. And she says to him, why are you crying? Why read a book when it's making you so sad? And he says, have you never read a book that speaks to you so profoundly that you feel that it understands you, who you are, what you want? And the character in the book feels understood by this book. Now, I'm not saying that I felt that Orwell understood me, but I felt that Orwell spoke to me in a very profound way. And I just
think, the other thing about the books, I think we're all using yes, we're reading it, but we're still seeing it in our mind's eye. We're still using our imagination, aren't we, from what we've read? I mean, a film is lovely, and I'm sure we all love films, and you don't even have to think about it. But with the book, I think you just feel more emotionally connected to a book than possibly to a film. Would you agree with that?
It depends. I think it depends, because I love film as well. I think there are two very different ways of telling a story. And I think as I said before, I think I have quite a visual imagination. And a lot of people have said to me, oh, I can see this as a film or a play or a film, you know, or something like that. And I think it's because I do write, I think, quite visually. And there's no question that when I am writing, I see it all. It's very vivid to me, and visually it's very vivid to me. And I think writing can be like that. But the experience of reading a book is very different from the experience of seeing a film, because when you're reading a book, you have to use your imagination and you people the book with your own ideas of what they look like. And so, you know, I have a very clear idea in my head of what each of my characters looks like, but that might be very different from the people
somebody else's.
And that doesn't mean that doesn't make it wrong. It just means that we're all different and we have different ways of seeing things. And I think the thing about it is you might have a visual image that's different from mine of Aileen or Kieran or Ali or whoever, but the universal truths within a book. So I talk a bit about grief. I talk about, one character is dying. I've got that moment where you fall in love. You've got moments when somebody sees you and really understands who you are and all of that. So these universal truth type things in a book, that is different because
you sound like Jane Austen with her universal truths.
Well, I think it's true to say that we have universal truths as humans.
Yes.
We have universal experiences. And if you're reading a book that appeals to you on that level of, I get that because I have felt that. It's the resonating. If a book resonates with you on some level, then I think it becomes very satisfying to read. And it's a bit like my character in my second thing saying, I'm reading this and I feel understood because of it. I feel like this person understands something that I've also felt. And I hope this doesn't all sound very high flown because I'm certainly not claiming to be Jane Austen, but I do think that it's part of what we get from reading. In a film, I think the whole thing is very different because we can see it, we're visualizing, we've got characters, we've got Margot Robbie, or we've got, as Kathy, or we've got the gorgeous Jacob Elordi. Oh my goodness, what a gorgeous guy, as Heathcliff. And we're seeing the wuthering and the moors, we're seeing them wuthering on the moors, and that's lovely in itself. But it's a very different experience from reading it. And we get something different, like we get something different from dance, or we get something different from opera. There are lots of ways that human beings tell each other stories. And, one of them is to write a novel, which is what this is.
Would you say, Tricia, that writing energizes you or exhausts you? And I think I probably know the answer to this. I think we all do.
No surprise, total energy. Guys, I don't write like I've got Stephen King's book on writing, which is really good.
Oh, yes.
He gets up in the morning. He has his
I know. I always have this image, the Barbara Cartland model. For anybody that remembers Barbara Cartland, she'd written 15 novels by lunchtime, hadn't she?
So Stephen King goes into his study and he writes. He comes out at sort of like lunchtime and then he goes for a walk. But he's got a wife, I mean, he doesn't have to wash the dishes or cook the food or, I mean, I don't do much of that, I have to admit. But the point is that he has somebody else to do all the boring stuff, like a lot of men. Why are there so many male authors? It's because they don't have to, wash up. But so I write at odd times, very, very odd times, because I am quite busy with other things. But so I'll start writing at 9 o'clock at night. I'm a total night owl. I just go to bed. So I'll start at 9 o'clock at night. I think there's nothing on the television. And I'll do that bit of my book. So I start writing. The worst thing, and it's happened to me a few times, is that I'm still writing at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I'm sitting and I haven't moved. So 4 hours, 5 hours. And during the day, if you write, you have to go and put the washing on or whatever, but you don't have to at 9 o'clock at night. And it's very bad for you because you sit for 5 hours. I mean, sitting's a new smoking, so you don't move. And then at 2 o'clock in the morning, you go to bed and your brain is going, so you don't sleep. So that's really bad. But it does make me quite productive because I'm quite awake at that time. I don't get sleepy. And I quite enjoy the silence, the quiet, and the fact that the world is sort of closing down around me and there aren't many people around, and that I'm still up and I'm still awake and I'm doing this thing which I enjoy enormously. So I write then, and then sometimes I'll start in the morning and I'll get up and I don't, have my breakfast. I don't immediately have a shower and get my makeup on and everything, and then I start writing, and it's fatal because it gets to lunchtime and I'm thinking, oh, for God's sake, go and have a shower, go get out of your pajamas. Very irregular the way that I write, but it seems to work for me because, like I said, I'm not a writer. You called me an author recently, a while ago, and I just think that is so not a label that I have yet embraced. It may be sometime, but I still see myself as somebody who writes as opposed to an author. That feels like very far beyond what I am.
They're very interchangeable. Generally, I suppose I use writer in the sense it's a very broad term. A writer might be a journalist, a writer of diaries, a writer of blogs. It's a general broad term. For me, an author, it's quite specific. You've produced the book. You are the author of the book. But it's very interchangeable. It's a very grey area. And another very grey area about writing is whether the author or the writer should have a pseudonym. What's your take on that?
I nearly did.
Okay.
When it was seriously secret, I kept thinking, I can't put this out. I'm not going to put this out under my own name because people
again, the jury's always out on this, and I always think, well, it worked for J.K. Rowling, when she did her Galbraith series or whatever, and it worked for George Orwell, clearly. I just don't know. I really don't know whether or not you benefit or not from the pseudonym. Maybe you're right. You kind of hide behind the name a little bit because who's going to know it's you?
Well, they aren't. I ended up not going that route. I even came up with lots of different names I could use, and then I decided not to. And I just thought, well, if I put this out under my name, I think one of the biggest advantages that I've got is the fact that I have a social media platform, quite a big one. And because I decided to go the self-publishing route, Wendy, which was very, very important to me, that choice that I made to go self-publishing and not to try and get an agent and a publisher. I thought I've got this terrific advantage in doing that, of having my blog. I've got three there's a Venn diagram that there's an overlap in the middle, but I've got three distinct groups. I've got customers, I've got blog followers, and I've got the sort of Tricia Super Troopers, the sort of Facebook group that I've got. And each of those
it makes sense to do it like that, really.
Quite substantial. And it does mean that if I want to connect with people, this is another reason for not having a pseudonym. If I want to connect with people, I've got three potential platforms with which to connect to them. And I've had the most phenomenal response from my people.
Right. Well, tribe, Tricia.
My tribe. Yeah, lovely response. My first appeal was for what I called super readers. And it was when I wrote a blog, and I made it a bit like giving birth. I think I called it giving birth at 77. And, there was a period of gestation. There's a period of growing the baby, and then there's the birth. And I asked, I said, now, I need help, and who would like to help me? And I made an appeal, and I had 70 or 80 people respond to that, saying, yeah, I'll read your book. I'll give you feedback. I'll help you.
Pretty amazing.
And after that, I've got this phenomenal group of women, some of whom are on this call, who have been absolutely wonderful for me.
Let's hear it for you, ladies. Tricia's right.
Because what they've done is they've listened to my story on Zoom calls. They've given me feedback. They've written to me. They've sent me emails. I've had detailed engagement with them and discussions, and they've been encouraging. And if I ever feel down or feel like I can't do it or it's not going well, all I need to do is read one of their emails and it keeps me going. They've been absolutely phenomenal and so important to me. And so I've had this platform. I've been able to appeal to people. I've had a response to that, which has been absolutely brilliant. And I am very, very, if I've said this already, I'm sorry if if I'm repeating myself, but I've already had, I don't know, I've just lost a lot. My pre-orders level has been
You're going to see the Amazon spike now, aren't you?
Yeah.
They call it the authors who use Amazon as a platform. Everyone calls it, the Amazon spike, and it's this graph. And when you get, your sales charts and you know how many books you sell, and you just see this thing shoot up, because that all these people have bought the book. So, the Amazon spike, triumphs really.
Drug, actually. It's like a drug. I
It's
try
like
not.
a drug.
I try not to click on I've got a thing that I click on, and it tells me how many
I would
pre-orders
say,
that day. And
yes, yeah,
sometimes, sometimes it's been. I mean, I've had the odd day where there's been loads, like 70,
yeah.
and which has been incredible. And then occasionally I'll get one.
Well, that's the way the cookie crumbles,
It's only been one in
isn't
the last hour.
it? Another question for you. What's the most difficult thing, Tricia, when you're writing characters from the opposite sex?
Oh, okay. Well, do you know
Difficult?
what? I saw that question that you sent me, and I thought,
And you thought, what the heck does she want to know that for?
it's a really interesting question, because I have got some, quite a lot of male characters in this, but I never really thought about it. I think when you're writing a work of fiction, you are using your imagination.
Yeah.
And part of using your imagination is about being able to put yourself into that person's shoes and thinking, how would they respond? What would they say? Now, I'm just going to illustrate that with one character who's called Kieran in the book, Kieran O'Brien. And he is the father of my gorgeous, beautiful, would-be actor, Finn. And I wrote him to be a problem for Finn, in the sense that so I thought of Kieran and I thought, okay, who is he? So he's an older man, he's a builder, he's a man's man, he's a person who uses his hands. He has no understanding of poetry or plays or what you would call the sort of softer romantic side of things. He likes sport. He loves his son Ronan, who's a great sports person who plays Gaelic football, and he doesn't get Finn at all, because Finn is a bit of a dreamer. He loves Yeats, he loves poetry, he wants to be an actor more than anything else. And he does say in the very early parts of the book, he's upset that his parents don't get him. He says, my father thinks that I'm just wasting my time prancing around on a stage, pretending to be somebody else. And it's like, it hurts him that his father feels like that, because he wants to be understood by his father, but his father just can't understand him. And he says to Saoirse, and the character in the book, he says, I want to use words as the tools of my trade, not hammers, because his father wants him to join his building firm. And I then had to write Kieran's response to Finn when he sees him in Romeo and Juliet. And he's quite offhand, and he's not very generous in his praise. And I just, so, to answer your question about writing that, I merely thought, what would this man say under these circumstances? This man who really doesn't get it. He's not got enough sympathy or imagination for this son that he doesn't understand. Now, we all know people like that, don't we? We all know men like that. And they have no truck with any of this namby-pamby business. You can almost hear them saying that. So I didn't find it difficult to write at all. So I wasn't writing that as a male character. I was writing it as a character who would have those views. And I think that's how I got around that. And then the other sort of strong male characters that I've got, Finn, obviously, and then I've got a lovely character who happens to be, who is actually gay, called Sean, both of whom I loved as people. In fact, my best friend who read the book early on for me, she came back and she said, oh, I just love Sean so much. I love Sean so much. And I love Sean too, because he's just the best kind of person that you could have in your life. And the same with Finn. And I think when you've got the characterization clear in your head, writing them becomes easy. And it's not about gender, it's just about who they are. Now, you know, males might see the world in one way. But
absolutely. Well, I mean, as you're saying that, I have in my mind Billy Elliot's father, you know, the miner could not engage, understand why his son would want to dance. You know, it's just two sides of the world. And I just have that in mind, really, that he thinks his son should be a miner. Well, great answer to the question. Absolutely great.
Can I also say to that, Wendy, I think there's an element there of homophobia.
Right.
That this man's man thing, I had this in my head because I'd heard a terrible, terrible story quite recently about a boy in a family, and he'd been offered, he's a ballet dancer, and a bit Billy Elliot, he'd been offered a place at that school in Richmond in Surrey, and his father had stopped him going. This is recently. And I said to the person who told me, that's just awful. Why would you do that? This boy is obviously very talented, and to be offered a place to become a ballet dancer in the best school in the country for that. And the friend said to me, he's terrified he's gay. And I said, but that's even that. It's horrible. It's like you can't allow your child to be who they need to be.
Absolutely.
It might be gay, so what?
Yeah.
They want to be a ballet dancer. And I see that a little bit with Kieran and Finn, that there's an element there in certain class, cultures, male ways of seeing the world that is fearful that they've given birth to a child who's gay. And I've got a very strong gay character in my book who, you know, in the story, you know, it's quite sad because he tells his mother and she reacts extremely badly. His father doesn't. So it's like that. I hope that answers your question. I think that it's like seeing things from that perspective makes it easy to write. I think you can then write believable people because you, in your head, you've kind of gone into their world and you understand it from their perspective.
Let's move on to the next book. This next book, I mean, obviously we don't want you to divulge any secrets or anything like that, but is this next book is it another standalone? Is that where do you see yourself going with this? A series or standalones? How is this going to play out in your mind, Trish?
So next book is, I thought I'd write a series called the Anam Cara Chronicles. So Anam Cara is Irish for soul.
Oh, you've frozen, Trish. Whoops. Trish?
On the same characters, similar characters.
Yep.
Have I frozen?
You keep talking. Oh yeah, you're back. Okay.
My internet looks as though it's good. Okay, so Anam Cara Chronicles means soulmate, so all sort of stories to do with love. The second book is called Once I Had a Secret Love. Do you remember that song, Once I Had a Secret Love?
Yes, I do. Who sang that? I know that song.
An old song, isn't it? Even the Golden Daffodils, you know, all of that. So Once I Had a Secret Love.
Kirby. Yeah.
In my first book, I've got the Kenny family, who are Aileen, Gerald, mother and father, to Sean, my lovely gay character, and I've written their story. So Aileen is a very, very unhappy person in the first book. She's clearly an alcoholic. She's also she's not nice. She's nasty, and I just thought, why would she be like that? So I've given her a backstory, but I also wanted to tell Sean's story as well. And so I'm writing that. I'm loving writing it. It's just brilliant to write, and I'm enjoying it a lot. They've all got secrets. So Aileen has secret, and then Sean has secret, and then Gerald, the dad, has a secret. So Once I Had a Secret Love, they all have secret loves. And
Have you got a date for this, Trish? Have you got a...
Yeah, I'm halfway through. Okay. I know how the rest of the story pans out, and then I mean, because I can publish it myself, I can publish it much more quickly because I'm not waiting on a publisher. And I'm hoping it will go out towards the end of the summer. I don't know. It just depends how many hours how long I, stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning and get it finished. But I'm loving writing it, and I'm really enjoying it. I've sent the first part of it, the first 34,000 words, to my editor, so that I can get a sort of running commentary on it, so that she can keep, so that she thinks I'm on the right tracks with it. I've got a brilliant editor, by the way. She helped me enormously with the first book, and I just feel like it's there. And then I've got a third story bubbling away. I keep thinking of things for that, which will probably center more on. I'm thinking actually more on Kieran and Ali and Pat and Kat and Pauline from the first book, possibly. And then I have another story which is completely different over here. So I'm thinking that will be the next set of books that I'll write.
Wow. You've got a busy summer ahead of you.
Not in the next summer, this is like, I love that joke by Barry Cryer. He had this brilliant joke, like, I'm so old now, I don't buy green bananas. And I feel like I'm getting to the point where, I think of it as green banana territory. It's like, how much time have I got left? But, well, I don't know that. I don't know how much time I've got left.
No, but I think, this is why I think people call it creative writing, because it brings out the creativity that I think a lot of people have inside them. And as you very rightly said earlier on, there are hundreds of people, I'd like to write a book. Well, go on then. What's stopping you? And you have done it. You have done it. And that's something that very few people actually achieve, but there's nothing stopping anyone. And as Tricia will tell you, a good cover and a good editor, and you're away. Really, that's all there is to it, ladies. That's all there is to it. But it's testament to you that you've done this after all these wonderful things that you've done in your life. I was really trying to find a quote that I felt kind of encapsulated you. I don't know whether I've hit the mark or not. This one is George Bernard Shaw. Life isn't about finding yourself. Life is about creating yourself. And I thought that was a quote that just seemed to sum up you, because you've done some amazing things. You've championed the cause of women of a certain age, and where is it? Where's my and? I'm a fan. I have the makeup and the book. I'm a brand follower, Tricia. I'm a brand follower.
Wendy.
We'll finish it there. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute blast talking to you. And I hope everybody gets something from this. Even if it's just, if you want to do something, just go for it. Just absolutely. I mean, Trish is just, she's our mascot, isn't she? I mean, when I lived in England and I worked at an office, a really dreary, boring office in Market Harborough, I used to have the Mark Twain mantra on my desk that said, 20 years from now, you will regret things more that you didn't do than that you have done. So sail away from the safe harbour, throw away the bowlines. And I used to have that on my desk, and I used to think, how am I going to do that? I'm stuck in an office. How am I going to do that? And where am I now? Overlooking mountains in Italy. So Tricia and I think, prove that follow your dreams. Anything is possible. And on behalf of all your followers, we really, really wish you the best with this, with the book. And, we really hope this is a writing journey that really will carry on, Tricia.
Thank you, Wendy. It's been an absolute pleasure.
So I'll call it a day. I'll say ciao. I'll say arrivederci. And thank you, ladies, for joining me. And if you've got any questions about the book or writing, then, send them to Tricia. I know she'll answer personally any of your messages. Please buy the book. That's the first thing that we always say. Buy the book. Give it a great review, support the authors. I mean, that's what we're all about, support local authors. So thank you again, Tricia, for your time. And it's been absolutely wonderful. It really has. And you deserve all the success in the world.
Thank you. Very kind of you.
Yeah.
Bye, ladies.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.